Imagine if our nation had a savings account, not just any savings account, but one that could grow and help pay off our national debt, fund critical infrastructure, and ensure prosperity for generations to come. This is not a fantasy. It's what the sovereign wealth fund that has just been authorized can do for the United States. Today, I want to explain what a sovereign wealth fund is, why America needs one, and how it can transform our national financial future. To understand this concept, let's start with something familiar to all of us, a personal savings account. When you save money in a bank account, it becomes an asset. An asset is defined as a future economic benefit. That savings account holds resources that are being set aside for future use. The funds in that account will earn interest, but more importantly, you're creating financial security. If you grow the fund large enough, it may exceed your needs, and you create a legacy or an inheritance for future generations. Now think bigger, much bigger. Consider university endowment funds, like Harvard's more than $54 billion endowment. American universities have well over $1 trillion in their endowments. Because these funds are not needed immediately, they can invest in diverse long-term assets. Fund managers invest not only in stocks, bonds, and real estate, but also alternative investments, hedge funds, private equity, and venture capital. These investments carry higher risks, but historically generate correspondingly higher returns. These returns are then used to support continuing university operations, while the endowment principal remains invested and continues to grow. The idea is that the fund becomes self-preserving and ensures that universities will remain solvent and be immune to inevitable economic shocks. A nation operates a sovereign wealth fund on similar principles, but at a national scale for the benefit of the country and all of its citizens. It's a state-owned investment fund that holds diversified assets across many classes for long durations. Norway's government pension fund Global is the world's largest sovereign wealth fund. It now holds over $1.75 trillion in such assets. This is more than $325,000 for every Norwegian citizen. Norway organized its fund in 1990 to manage the significant budgetary surplus generated by the Norwegian petroleum sector. The United States has petroleum assets too. In fact, it currently produces about 10 times as much as Norway, with a much higher potential going forward. This provides just a glimpse into where the money for a sovereign wealth fund might come from. Most recently, our government relies primarily on taxation for revenue. Before 1913, we funded our government mainly through tariffs and excise taxes, as well as by monetizing vast government real estate assets. The introduction of the federal income tax changed this, but it doesn't have to be our only source of national wealth. When the 16th Amendment was enacted in 1913, income tax was 1% on incomes above $3,000 and 7% on incomes above $500,000. That's in 1913. At the time, the government raised $35 million in income taxes. In that same year, the government spent $714 million with a balanced budget. Less than 5% of government spending was supported by income tax. The size and cost of the US government has increased astronomically. The tax rate has increased as well. Now the US government raises almost $5 trillion annually, mostly from taxes on earnings. It then spends roughly $6.75 trillion, contributing another 1.75 to the growing $36.1 trillion national debt. As this is likely to continue, the need to establish a national savings account should be quite obvious. The Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is nothing more than a giant government savings account, may represent the best opportunity to reverse the trend of ever increasing reliance on taxpayers. There are many resources for assets that could be used to establish the Sovereign Wealth Fund: taxes, tariffs, natural resource revenues, sale or lease of government assets in responsible ways, reduced expenditures by the government. The benefits could be transformative. Debt reduction. The fund's returns could be partially dedicated to paying down our national debt, currently over $36 trillion. Even a modest 5% return on a multi-trillion-dollar fund could make significant progress in debt reduction. Infrastructure investment. We could use funds proceeds to rebuild our aging infrastructure without increasing taxes or debt. Economic stability. The fund could act as a buffer during economic downturns, reducing our reliance on debt financing during crises and taxation. Intergenerational wealth. Like a family trust fund or a university endowment, it would preserve and grow national wealth for future generations. Innovation funding. Returns could also fund research and development in critical areas like clean energy, biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. The Sovereign Wealth Fund could be used to make more resources available to the Small Business Administration to help create new American businesses. Uh, Critics might argue that the government shouldn't be in the investment business. However, we already have successful models in the Federal Reserve's management of its portfolio and state pension funds. The Small Business Administration has successfully been managing a fund of outside investments to support small business investment companies for more than 60 years. The key is establishing proper governance, investment guidelines, and discipline. In particular, to preserve the principal and spend only a portion of the returns. This is exactly how universities have grown their endowments and how wealthy people create generational wealth. Consider this. If we had established a fund in 1980 with just $100 billion and achieved returns similar to university endowments, approximately 10% annually, that fund would be worth well over $2 trillion today, even after adjustment for inflation. As Warren Buffett regularly points out, compound interest works. Albert Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, saying, "He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." Right now, America is paying it through crushing interest on our national debt. We could instead be earning it through a sovereign wealth fund. I, for one, have interest. The fund was established by presidential order. To make it permanent and to sustain it will likely require bipartisan cooperation and careful planning. The presidential order reads, Section 1, Policy and Purpose. It is the policy of the United States to maximize the stewardship of our national wealth for the sole benefit of American citizens. To this end, it is in the interest of the American people that the federal government establish a sovereign wealth fund to promote fiscal sustainability, lessen the burden of taxes on American families and small businesses, establish economic security for future generations, and promote United States economic and strategic leadership internationally. Section 2, Sovereign Wealth Fund. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce, in close coordination with the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, shall develop a plan for the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund consistent with Section 1 of this order. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Commerce shall jointly submit this plan to the President within 90 days of the date of this order. Such plans shall include recommendations for funding mechanisms, investment strategies, fund structures, and a governance model. The plan shall also include an evaluation of the legal considerations for establishing and managing such a fund, including any needed legislation. The third section sets some general provisions. The language in this order is astoundingly simple and easy to understand. I hope that it doesn't develop into a typically incomprehensible omnibus legislation that includes provisions for myriad unrelated items. We will need strong government structures to prevent political interference, professional management with clear investment mandates, transparency and accountability measures, discipline in approving spending from the fund, a long-term commitment to maintaining the fund. Now, some might say that America can't afford to save right now. Others might argue that we can't afford not to. Even if we temporarily increase the debt to fund long-term investment, the return of the fund will greatly exceed the interest expense. As mentioned earlier, many university endowments return much better than 10% annually due to the large portion of assets invested in alternative classes. Venture capital has returned close to 30% on average over the last 50 years. It also is the only investment asset class that systematically creates new businesses and directly grows the gross national product, fighting inflation. Every year that we delay is a year of lost compound interest, missed opportunities for national wealth creation, and another year of uncertainty in our future. Throughout history, more great nations have fallen through financial mismanagement than through military defeat. Indeed, the strength of the Roman Empire was undermined by hyperinflation and excessive taxation of productive citizens. The Ming Dynasty depleted its vast treasury by spending on lavish imperial projects and unproductive military campaigns. The Spanish Empire relied too heavily on importing precious metals from its colonies in the 18th century. This caused hyperinflation, devaluing currency, and the Spanish were forced to liquidate real estate assets. The Ottoman Empire defaulted on its massive public debt in 1875, which triggered an unrecoverable economic crisis. The current state of inflation and the national debt should raise concern for every American. We have right now what I would consider to be a unique opportunity to secure America's financial future, reduce our dependence on foreign creditors, and create lasting prosperity for generations to come, in perpetuity. I applaud this order and fully support it. At my firm, Polynomial Ventures, we specialize in helping accredited and institutional investors, including sovereign wealth funds, to secure their future through long-term investing in early-stage technology companies. Contact us at www.polynomial-vc.com. That's POLYNOMIAL-VC.com.